Is it time to ban British patriotic songs? Well, according to cellist Sheku Kanneh-Mason, it is. He has caused some controversy by stating that listening to Rule Britannia is very difficult and offensive, and it should be removed from last night of the Proms. We've had some calls to ban Rule Britannia pretty much since the woke movement kicked off in 2020, where we have had a lot of stuff come up about Britain's past, Britain's role in slavery, the British Empire and its history. Now, one thing that gets under my skin is that there is a lot of manipulation and twisting of Britain's history. The first most important thing, of course, is to take into context that this was an age when empires were normal. It was an age where you would either become an empire or you would become a colony. And we have many empires of the time. We had the Dutch Empire, we had the French Empire, the Spanish Empire. We had the British Empire, we had lots of empires, the Ottoman Empire. But we had only one empire that chose to use its wealth and resources to end slavery, and that was the British Empire. Now, there were many times when Britain came close to being invaded itself, but it succeeded in creating one of the most powerful empires the world ever saw. I cannot see what is so offensive about Rule Britannia's lyrics. If anything, it is highlighting the struggles that Britain went through when it was an empire and prior to being an empire. Now, some people like to say that Rule Britannia, Britannia rule the waves, Britons never, never, never will be slaves, is some kind of gloating about Britain's imperial history. But it is much more likely that these lyrics are related to Britain's role in slavery, which was ultimately a benevolent one and one which helped to put an end to the practice once and for all. Now, Barbary slave pirates, which gets very little attention in the media, but which is a crucial point of slavery in history and of Britain's role in ending slavery, was something that Britain was struggling with for almost 300 years. Now, from the 1500s to the 1800s, Barbary slave pirates were raiding the coasts of Britain. They were raiding the coasts of Devon and Cornwall, and they were snatching people from the West Country and selling them to the slave trade in Morocco. Now, in those early years, Britain was far too weak to actually prevent this. But as time went on and its empire grew, it became strong enough to repel the Barbary slave traders. And eventually, this resulted in 1816, the British Empire and a Dutch squadron went to Algiers and they bombed the port of Algiers, which was the base of the Barbary slave trade. And they destroyed that trade once and for all, freeing 1,600 slaves in the process. This was what finally broke the power of the Barbary slave trade and ended up freeing once and for all those thousands of people who had been sold into slavery, kidnapped by these pirates from Britain and Europe for almost 300 years. This is a very important point of our history, and yet it is given so little attention. And when we get individuals such as this who go on about how offensive these lyrics are, it's very clear to me that these people don't really know much about British history. Let's not forget that it was the British Empire that decided to use its wealth, time and resources in order to end the transatlantic slave trade. Now, slavery was simply normal back in the day, something that the people of today can't seem to understand. And I fail to understand how you can actually judge the past by the standards of today. It doesn't make any sense. But it was Britain who lost thousands of lives in the Royal Navy to end slavery. It was Britain who sent the West Africa Squadron over to patrol the seas and challenge the slavers. Men lost their lives, many men lost their lives in order to free slaves. It was Britain who would bribe states and challenge empires to end the slave trade. It was Britain who accumulated so much wealth over centuries, it is true, but ultimately chose to use that wealth in order to end one of the most abominable practices in the history of mankind. But does Britain get any credit for it? Nope. Today, we have cellists going around demanding that Rule Britannia, which is a symbol of Britain's history, something to be proud of, ought to be dropped from last night of the Proms. Let's not forget also that if we didn't have an empire, who would have stood up to Nazi Germany? Sacrifices that the Royal Navy made, the sacrifices that the British Empire made back in the day were astronomical. In a world where, yes, slavery was rampant, in a world where ethics and morals were not particularly strong. We had one empire that chose to use that power for the greater good. And it wasn't just those at the top of the empire who fought to end this practice. Many grassroots campaigns in Britain were the ones who kicked off the abolition of the slave trade in the first place. The British Empire and the Royal Navy fought for over 50 years to end the slave trade. They sacrificed so much. The British Empire and the British working classes of this country, who were the ones who had to keep the country running and, quite frankly, were involved in their own form of slavery themselves, in a form called bonding. And the suffering that the working classes of Britain went through during the time was atrocious. But it was thanks to their sacrifice, and it was thanks to the sacrifices of the empire, that finally this practice came to an end. I fail to see why these individuals keep talking about Britain's past and Britain's imperialistic past as if it is something to be ashamed of. Every empire, every country has an imperialistic past, and not all of them were as benevolent as the British were. It would be a grave insult to remove Rule Britannia simply because there are some people out there who don't seem to know much about Britain's history and don't understand the sacrifices that were made by people in the past over the course of hundreds of years. The woke movement, which sprang up in 2020, is in fact a living embodiment of ignorance that continues to splash itself around this country. It's an insult to those in the past. It does absolutely nothing for relations in this country. And I think it's about time that these people opened up a history book and actually learned something about the country that they call their home.
Have you got what it takes to be a reasoned presenter? Well, send us a short clip of yourself to join@reasoned.uk and we might be seeing you on this very channel very soon indeed.